Welcome to this video, everyone, and in this video I'm going to be giving a review and giving my thoughts on Disney's Mulan 2020, the remake of Disney's animated Mulan from 1998. Now, this poor film had to have its debut on Disney Plus. As many people know, it was originally supposed to come out in March earlier this year. Then COVID happened, obviously, and then Disney thought it'd be safe and pushed it back to July. But then it got pushed back again to August, and then finally Disney just said, fuck it, let's put it on Disney Plus, see if we can get people to watch it on there. It's got a $30 price tag for people who want to pay for it and get what's called Premier Access to watch it right now. I paid for it because I wanted to watch something new, and plus I was already really looking forward to this movie, just because when Disney first started doing this trend of remakes, starting in 2014 with Maleficent and then in 2015 with Cinderella, when they're talking about remakes to do next, one of the ones I always thought would be really cool is if they remade Mulan, went with the approach of making it sort of like an epic war film, which the original film obviously has those elements to it. So this is why it was a remake I thought actually would have a lot of potential. Now, when it comes to these remakes have either gone sort of like three ways. One way is making them sort of like a weird kind of like sequel to the original film. That's what Alice in Wonderland did and Christopher Robin did. The second way is using sort of the original framing and story of the original film, but then sort of adding your own sort of spin and twist to it. That's what the Jungle Book did and what Aladdin did to a certain extent. And then finally the third way, and what's probably the laziest way, is doing sort of a shot-for-shot remake of the original film. And the remake that's obviously most guilty of this is The Lion King from last year, which that film just beat for beat copied, shot for shot, was just a remake when it came to dialogue, framing, scenes of the original Lion King, with just a few new stuff spread out here and there, just to really fill in time mainly. Now, when you saw the trailers for Mulan, and when I saw the trailers, it was very obvious early on that Disney was not doing a shot-for-shot remake. They were actually sort of taking elements from the actual legend of Mulan, but just sort of not doing sort of its own sort of like a shot-for-shot remake of the original film, taking obviously the story and sort of the main framing of what the story of and legend of Mulan's all about, but really just making a film that sort of elevates itself from beyond just being sort of a simple remake and trying to be something that's actually kind of special. And I saw that, I was like, God damn, Disney, I'm kind of looking forward to this now, and that's why I was really looking forward to this movie. And immediately when I watched this film, and what I immediately just dug about it while I was watching it was just the feel it had. It just had this amazing sort of cultural feel to where it just didn't feel like sort of this glossy Hollywood production. The way this film was directed, when it came to the scenery, when it came to the costume design, the production, everything, it was just like, wow, this feels like something special, something different coming from Disney. This does not feel like your typical Disney Hollywood film at all. This was like a real felt like a weird sort of cultural experience. Now, it's a cultural experience where everyone's sort of speaking English, but you can sort of gloss over that for the fact that they handled really the Chinese elements in this film, the way they brought Chinese culture to sort of a big Hollywood movie. They brought it to the screen really well, so immediately that's what was really cool while I was watching the movie. Now, this movie takes itself, when they made it, they took the approach of trying to go for a more serious and grounded approach to the legend of Mulan. Part of that, unfortunately, involved removing sort of the whimsical elements from the original film. So that's mainly taking away Mushu and the songs. Now, when it comes to Mushu, I mean, people knew this early on based on those trailers and announcements that were made, that Mushu is not in this film in sort of his, obviously, Mushu form, how we saw him in the original movie. You just don't get that. He does have a presence in the film as sort of this weird kind of phoenix, but it's not like Mushu from the original film. And the whole time when you're watching the film, with the sort of serious and grounded approach they took, immediately while I was watching, I'm like, man, there's just no way I could picture sort of a jive-talking comedic dragon in this movie. It just wouldn't fit. If the movie went with a more whimsical approach from the get-go, that would have fit. But with the approach they went for the film, this film in particular, is just like, Mushu, he just wouldn't have fit in this film, unfortunately, because I love Mushu. He's one of my favorite Disney characters. He's a great Disney sidekick. But he just wouldn't have worked with the approach they went in this film. And when it came to the songs are in this film in traditional song sing-along form, like how they did with Aladdin, Beauty and the Beast, and The Lion King. But what they do is that the scenes that they would appear in, they have sort of the main sort of instrumental beats to where it's all like, okay, it's cool that they're actually sort of acknowledging the songs, even though they're not in sort of traditional sing-along song fashion. But they do pay tribute to the original songs from the animated film. in that way. Thankfully, something the film actually did sort of carry over from the original film. Well, it did have some humor to it. It does take itself seriously, but you do get some humor spread here and there. Mainly the stuff that happens between Mulan and sort of her soldier friends that you see in the original movie. That stuff, I was pleasantly surprised that they had that trio in this film, because those guys were pretty funny in the original, and they have some scenes. It's not exactly the same role and same personality, but they do have their moments in this film that makes it enjoyable to see things go on. And while this film does sort of take sort of obviously the approach of not doing sort of a shot-for-shot remake, it does have sort of those major scenes that you would recognize from the original film. They just don't do it where they're copying dialogue for dialogue, shot for shot, like The Lion King did, and even like Beauty and the Beast did to a certain extent. And that actually makes it, I actually really enjoy that approach, because it makes it feel like I'm watching something that I haven't, seen before. If I want to watch something that's shot for shot, the original Mulan, I can watch the original Mulan. But watching this film and watching sort of a different sort of serious approach, that takes like real vision, real writing, and real direction, to where it's all like, okay, this is like an actual sort of new but familiar experience, so that I can like really get behind. That just doesn't feel like super lazy like what they did with The Lion King of that last year. And from that, I really appreciated that. But the film's called Mulan, and a lot of it just doesn't work if they don't get Mulan right. And with the way they do Mulan, so the character development and sort of like the way they sort of tell her story, it actually does feel like you're watching sort of like a Chinese legend like come to life and come into her own. That it was actually pretty damn cool, even more so, or arguably as much so as it was in the original film. And the actress, I mean, these Chinese names, I do sort of a bad job with them, but she did a good job. She wasn't overly sassy or just too over the top when she was sort of displaying sort of her weirdness at the beginning, or when she was trying to be obviously Ping from the original movie. That's what she was called as when she was a soldier. She doesn't overdo it when she's a boy. It just feels like just right. It was like there was a subtleness, but it still felt like good, and it still felt like powerful, to where it's all like, okay, this is this version of Mulan done right here. And all the other actors that they do in this film, I mean, it's an all Chinese cast appropriately. All of them felt good, and I didn't really get like a bad vibe from anyone. All of them were good. The soldiers were good. Like I said, they added a good sort of comedic element that this film definitely needed. Now, when it came to some stuff that I wasn't really all that crazy about when I was watching the film, main thing was the villains. The two villains that you get in this film, one is the equivalent of Shan Yu from the original film, though he's not called Shan Yu, and the other is a witch, who I'm guessing is from the original like Chinese legend of Mulan. When it came to the witch, she was actually somewhat interesting just because of her powers and ultimately the role she plays in Mulan's story. It was all like, wow, okay, that's actually kind of interesting. That's something I was not expecting. When it came to the Shan Yu character, Shan Yu from the original Mulan was never one of my favorite villains. I mean, there's just not a whole lot to him. He's just sort of kind of snarling, evil, with not much charisma. He wants to take over China. Not a whole lot to him. And really, there's just not a whole ton to this main villain either. He's just sort of there to be someone who Mulan's ass she can kick at the end, but that's really it. So that's kind of what you get right there. But the movie's called Mulan, and thankfully they get her character legend and really sort of character development and really bringing her legend to life. They do that pretty well. Ultimately, when it came to all the stuff this movie brought to the table, when it came to sort of the cultural elements, when it came to sort of, like I said, the direction, the production, sort of that cultural feel, the way they did sort of the action, it was pretty damn impressive, and some of it was kind of intense for sort of a Disney production. The way they did this, like I said, it didn't feel like just that shot-for-shot remake. It had those scenes, some iconic moments and beats from the original film, but it really had this like serious and really sort of grounded Chinese cultural approach. It's sort of weird to describe, but it was there, and it was just done really well. And ultimately, this ended up being one of the better Disney remakes that they've done. So I would actually give this a 9 out of 10. Like I said, this was a really enjoyable remake. And when it comes to sort of comparing it to sort of the remakes Disney has done in this quote-unquote Disney live-action cinematic universe, it's right at the top, man. I mean, I don't want to completely tell my rankings just because I actually want to do a video on this pretty soon. So look out for that. But ultimately, this movie, it's near the top. There's really only like a couple of the remakes that they've done that I prefer. But this was really really well done. So 9 out of 10 for this one. Now for sort of the final part of this video, what I'll say is that while I was watching this movie, and I was watching it at home because it premiered on Disney Plus, the whole time I was watching it, I just couldn't help but think that, man, I really wish I could be watching this in the theaters. Just because there's nothing like the actual theater going experience when it comes to watching sort of these epic moments on the big screen, sort of the visuals, the production. You know, this kind of production is something that it's like, man, I hate that this had to get relegated to Disney Plus, because when I'm watching something that's premiering, like a movie for the first time, that stuff is meant to be on the big screen. And even sort of sharing sort of laughs, like the funny moments in this film, I'm like, man, I would love to see how an audience would react to some of the stuff in this movie. And even some of the moments that pop up when they're sort of kind of almost sort of replicating stuff from the original film. So here's sort of the audience reaction, like, oh shit, here's that scene. So when it comes to sort of debuting this stuff on Disney Plus, I mean, I'd be curious to see how this movie's going to do financially with the $30 price tag, and maybe people just kind of just watching it for free in some fashion, whether it's a bootleg or just sort of watching at a friend's house. Not sure how this movie's going to do, but I'm definitely I hope they actually refrain from putting these kind of big movies on home video like that, like just because or streaming, just because this stuff is meant to be seen on the big screen. So whether that means like Disney has to delay like Black Widow when that's supposed to debut a couple months from now, I hope they don't put that on Disney Plus. But that's sort of my ending rant right there. There's nothing like the actual theater going experience, even though unfortunately I'm here in California where theaters are currently closed right now, so I can't exactly walk out and go see the new Christopher Nolan movie Tenet. I'm really upset about that. But that's enough rambling about that. Ultimately, Mulan was a really good remake, near the top of the list of when it comes to these Disney remakes. So yeah, that's my thoughts on Mulan. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and as always, thank you for watching.